What you will notice so far is that the equations of all the straight lines that we have been drawing have a y term, an x term, and they also have a number term. Now, the coefficient of the x term we call m, and that is called the gradient of the straight line. The number term, plus represented by plus c here, is the y-intercept. In other words, that is the value on the y-axis that the straight line goes through. So the general equation of any straight line is given by y equals mx plus c. So again, m is the coefficient of x, which is the gradient of the straight line, and plus c, the number term, that's just the y-intercept. That's where the line cuts the y-axis. So we must learn this general equation. We're going to talk about the gradient m. The gradient m actually tells you two things about the straight line. First of all, the sign of the gradient tells us the direction the line slopes. So in other words, if m is positive, then the line is going to slope up. So if m is positive, the line slopes up. And likewise, if the line slopes down, then the gradient m is negative. So just a quick recap, the sign of the gradient tells you what direction the line slopes. So if m is positive, if the gradient is positive, then the line slopes up. Think about it, if someone's positive, they're always looking up. So line slopes up if the gradient is positive. If the gradient is negative, then the line will slope down. So if someone is negative, they're always tend to be looking at negative, down and being down about things. Okay. So that's the first thing we need to understand about the gradient. Its sign tells you what direction the line slopes. The second thing is the value of the gradient. In other words, the number that m is. The value of the gradient tells you how steep the line is. So what I've done here is I've drawn a few lines which have different degrees of steepness. And they're clearly all lines with positive gradients because they're all sloping up. So for example, if you take the line furthest to the left here, that could be a line which has a gradient of, say, positive 0.5. Okay. If we move across, you'll notice the line is a bit more steeper. So because this line is more steeper than the previous one, the value of the gradient is going to be a bit bigger. So this line here could represent a gradient of, say, +1. If we move further across to the right, the next line could represent, say, a gradient of +4. If we keep moving as we get steeper, that could represent a line with a gradient of +8. Okay, so that's what we're saying. As we move from left to right, the line is getting steeper, and that means the value of the gradient is getting bigger. Okay, I could illustrate that as well with lines that are sloping down. So these are clearly all negative gradients. So for example, this line here could represent a gradient of, say, -1/4. And then the next line across is a bit steeper. That could be a gradient with, say, value -1. Getting steeper again. So the value of that gradient could be, say, -4. Getting steeper again, gradient here could be, say, -8. So the point is, the sign of the gradient tells you the direction the line slopes. So if the gradient is positive, the line will slope up. And the value of the gradient tells you how steep the line is. So 0.5, then 1 bigger, so getting steeper, 4 getting steeper again, 8 getting steeper again. -1/4, -1 is a bit steeper, minus 4 is getting steeper again, minus 8 getting steeper again. So the value of the gradient tells you how steep the line is.